Go. There we
Hello,
go.
how you doing, sir?
Hi, Philip. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. How you
Alaikum
doing?
salam wa rahmatullah.
I'm glad I finally got through. Can you hear me clearly?
All here and see Philip.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you here clearly.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I'm so glad to have you with us. Alaikum salam, everyone. Thank you so much for accepting to join us in this live. It's an honor to have you here. And maybe a quick introduction from your side before we do a quick Q&A.
hmm my name is Immortal Technique. My name is originally Felipe Coronel. I was born in el Hospital Militar de Lima in Peru. I came to the United States very young as a young immigrant, and I stood here. I stayed here in New York City for most of my life. I lived in Harlem. So my background is understanding the world from this perspective here. But also, I traveled significantly a lot because after my brief incarceration, I became the artist known as Immortal Technique. So I went around the world. And one of the things that I learned about, obviously, in my travels was the suffering and the occupation of the people of Palestine, those in the West Bank and those in Gaza as well. So I very much appreciate your time, your energy, your hard work, and everything that you've done to make this happen. Also, I'm a student of the media, so I understand that without people such as yourself and other individuals, none of what we're seeing would be on the news. Fox, MSNBC, ABC, they've all decided that this genocide doesn't exist, that the dead children don't exist. And what I've been having to do is tell people that as difficult as it is to watch some of these scenes, it's no different than when we had to watch videos of police brutality in the 80s and 90s because people didn't think it existed, because people had to put the pictures of a burnt young black man called Emmett Till, a black boy, a little kid, 13 years old, that was lynched and burned alive. And people didn't believe that was true until they showed the pictures. So while the pictures and the videos may be difficult for people to see, I remind everybody that they're important because they remind people that this is really going on, that it's not a lie, that it's not a political objective, that people are definitively suffering. So, I appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Thank you so much, Philippe, or Immortal Technique. Uh, Again, thank you very much for that perspective on things. And it's amazing to have an artist with a message. And a lot of the art that we hear nowadays, it's sometimes you feel it's directed by the wrong people or for the wrong causes. But the art that you bring to the table, I think, is a little bit different. Can you tell us a little bit more about, your most famous rap songs, or, which ones you advise people to listen to, and maybe sing for us here a couple of lines from a couple of them. Whenever I talk, after I finish, I'm gonna mute myself because the sound you hear is the buzzing spy drones above us, and I don't want it to over. I want you to please have a good sound when you talk. So that's why I'm muting myself. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. So the music that I do is obviously of a revolutionary nature, but I remind people that I am the person that always has championed those individuals that are living in oppression. So I tell people, if it was the Palestinians that were occupying a land of Jewish people, and it was the Palestinians that had 100 nuclear weapons, and it was the Palestinians that were allied to the empire of America that controls Saudi, Jordan, and all of these other countries, and they were using it to punish the Jewish people that lived in the West Bank and Gaza, then I would be on the side of those people that are living under occupation. And the sad reality is that the United States, in my mind, and the reason that I talk about it so much and so much of the corruption is because people need to understand that Israel doesn't do anything without the approval of the United States. that as an empire, it is completely in control. And as a matter of fact, even before the ground invasion of Gaza, and we talked about this on my live before, that they needed to wait until American mercenaries showed up, veterans from the Afghan and Iraq war, because they're specifically trained in something called CQC, which is close quarter combat and urban combat. And the Israeli army, unfortunately for them, took their soldiers off conventional duty, and they haven't been a real army since the 60s or 70s in the way that they used to be. And therefore, they're used to being more of a police force. And they needed to hire mercenaries and get the approval from Joe Biden and make sure that people understand that whether it's Democrat or Republican, the foreign policy for many of these political parties around the world remains the same. If you look at Australia's Labour Party, they elected a guy who claims to be the left, and he can't even say that this is a genocide or that any indiscriminate bombing has taken place. So I remind people that in the United States, there is no left. There is no socialism. There is no communism. That is an indication of how far right as a society we have come after 9/11. So I tell people, whether it's Tel Aviv Trump or Genocide Joe, neither one of them is going to be helpful to the citizens and civilians in Gaza and in Palestine in general. So my music has always been very critical. And I think that, you know, if it's a song like The Fourth Branch, you asked me to name specific songs. If there's a personal story like You Never Know, which is about someone who dies close to you and dies of a disease and you can't control that. And now we're seeing a situation where people are dying in diseases of Gaza that you can control, that people could easily solve if they let more medicine and more food come in. Well, that's where I come with some of the strongest criticisms that I have of the state, and especially of the empire, how it functions, how we're not really a representative democracy. But in terms of discussing other factors, for example, I have a song called Bin Laden that was produced by DJ Green Lantern, who, by the way, is Palestinian. So I said to him, I said, listen, let's talk about how the Iraqi people are not fighting for Saddam Hussein. He's gone. They're fighting because someone else is occupying their country. If China was occupying the United States, I don't like Mr. Trump, but if China invaded the United States 3 years ago, I would have fought to keep them out of my neighborhood. This is not yours. This is mine. Me and my family live here. So I think it's important that we always remember that, unfortunately, history doesn't always play out the same way we think it does in relation to how the political parties are set up. One last thing that I would love to explain to the audience that's present here is that there are only two presidents in American history that have paused the settlements by Israel. One was Eisenhower after World War II, and the other one was George Bush Sr. When he said, listen, we're going to hold back all your loans, and we will not, will not approve any more loans for Israel until these settlements stop. And the settlements stopped for over, I believe it was 14 months. But what was the result, my brother? Well, the result, Mr. Mansour, was that George Bush Sr. found himself in the next election running against two Christian Zionists. The first was Ross Perot, that took away one entire state and facilitated a victory for the other Christian Zionist. That is, of course, the man who would become president, Mr. Bill Clinton. So I think that, you know, I don't show favoritism for one side or another. Obviously, I warn people about the kind of almost ISIS-like dedication to a warped vision of Christianity that comes from the right wing. But I warn people that when you talk about Democrats, you're not talking about the left. They're not the real left. They're a center-right party that is governed by Joe Biden, who was one of the most conservative and racist members of that party and has had the biggest political makeover probably in American history. So I'm just here to ask questions to you in the same way you're here to ask questions to me, so my audience can get a better understanding of what's going on in Gaza. And maybe after you ask the next question, maybe I can ask you a question to find out what's going on out there.
Definitely, it's a pleasure to answer all of your questions together with your audience. I didn't know about the information about Eisenhower and Bush Sr. Thank you for this information. Maybe one last question is, Yeah, I mean, before the question, I mean, even Bernie Sanders, right, who we thought can have like a strong position in what's happening, you know, given his history. I mean, even he unfortunately didn't side by what's happening here. He took the side of the Zionist regime, which is unfortunate. So I really feel bad for the citizens of the United States. Like they have like both sides of the coin. It's the same coin at the end of the day. And like you said, it's a false sense of democracy, and I don't see a way out. From what you've seen over the last 3 months, if I may ask, have you seen a change in those who have been neutral? Have you seen like whether it's the regular Joe, Jane, or the politician or the businessman, have you seen any kind of change at all, given what's been exposed, especially on social media or on national television? Like any kind of change? I would like to get a better sense from you on that, especially in the United States.
Sure. Um, well, first and foremost, I definitely have seen people that are much more involved now in what's going on in terms of reposting, in terms of wanting to be curious about what's actually going on in Palestine, and also a resurgence in people that want to know about the Nakba, that want to know about the 75-year occupation, and also people that are very interested now in asking the type of questions that they haven't asked before, which is why would Israel support Hamas against Fatah? Why would they want to divide these two people? Well, is it easier to rule people if they're divided and against each other? You have to understand that in my mind and reading military history, the best way to overcome an enemy that is larger than you is to play them off against one another. And to be honest, while Israel may be larger in terms of how it treats the Palestinians by physical territory, Israel itself is much smaller than the region that it's in, that's surrounded by Arab and Muslim countries. So what has actually happened is that these countries have now been put into complete opposite with each other and affected. And obviously, listen, the Arab world is not unilateral. People have different politics and different political opinions. But one thing I'm going to say that is going to maybe give people some understanding and maybe hurt some other people's feelings is that the United States proclaimed to have a war on terror for 15 years, right? Where they were involved in overthrowing over 9 countries. And I think that at the end of this war on terror, we proclaimed that ISIS and Al Qaeda were our worst enemies. And we had to destroy these people, destroy the governments they lived in, destroy the countries they lived in. And then during the attempt to overthrow the government of Syria, we used ISIS fighters and we used splinter cells of Al Qaeda, the same people that we were told were the worst people in the world that had committed 9/11, which brings me back to how all of this actually got into play. And that is that when we discuss American politics and you talk about there not being two sides, it's very important to note that before, like in the 60s, 70s, Republicans and Democrats were actually very, very close in their support for both Israel and Palestine. It was much more centered, around 44 to 48%. But there were two specific instances that drove the so-called right wing and Democrats apart. The first was the first Gulf War, where it was seen as, oh my God, Israel's a big ally. We have to take out Saddam Hussein, even though we were the ones that armed him with all the gas and all of the horrible things that he used to kill Kurds. But the other one was 9/11. And the reason that I bring up 9/11 is because your public and my public often need to be reminded of what we call the 9/11 effect. And the 9/11 effect is when all politics shifted to the right. So if you were a centrist during 9/11, then all of a sudden you're a leftist now. If you were on the left, then you were on the far left. And if you were a right winger, then you were considered a centrist. And those people that were on the far right that we never listened to, the people like the coalition that Mr. Netanyahu made with his government, those people that are saying nuke Gaza, those lunatics, they gained prominence and understanding. A version of them gained prominence in American political discourse in the middle of it. And therefore, that's the aftermath of the world that we're living in now. So I think people are starting to wake up more to that reality and understand that that happened. And therefore, Americans are tired of being lied to. They don't believe what they see on the news anymore. So if someone says, oh, yeah, there's no civilian casualty, you know, a regular person maybe 30 years ago would have said, okay, fine, ABC said there's nothing. But now people are saying, oh, let's go to Gaza News Live, or let's go see what Ismail posted, or Motaz. What is really going on? If there's no civilian casualties, how come these streets are full of dead people? You know, how come they're letting free McDonald's in to Tel Aviv, and they're only sending body bags into Gaza, not food? So I think that this has really set off the American public. In the same way, I'll compare it to the post-Vietnam era, because in Vietnam, people believed, oh, they're all communists, we need to bomb them. And afterwards, we realized, what are we doing? We were bombing Laos, Cambodia. We killed 1 million people for what? For nothing. So I think that Americans are starting to realize not just that, but also that every single time they complain about not having health care or some other service or things that aren't there, there's a clear indication that they had the money. It's not like they don't have the money. And they're tired of being played against. Oh, you gave our money to immigrants, or you gave our money to homeless people. No, it's not your money anymore. You don't realize you live in a big corporation, and they don't care what you think it is. They're going to spend the money on what they think they should spend the money on. Because at the end of the day, brother, the tax revenue doesn't equal what the GDP is. These people print their own money. They're capable of flexing the numbers in any way, shape, or form. And what they've actually set up when they offer people aid, right, is they open what they call a company store. They say, okay, we're going to send you $800 million in aid. That doesn't mean we're sending you $800 million in a bag, Habibti. No, we're sending a line of credit to your country, so you can buy these F-16s for $20 million. What I'm going to tell your audience is that the Arab countries have been lied to, and they've been manipulated, because the F-16s that were sold to Jordan, to Saudi, are armed with a kill switch, which means that they can be turned off at any time by the Pentagon mainframe, which means if you don't fight for who I want you to fight for, then I'll shut your plane down. And if your plane ever strikes a target that I don't want you to strike, then I'll shut your plane down. So irrespective of what weapons they sold them, they're still in control of them. So I think that's something that I've seen a lot of people become much more clear about, and that they're starting to wake up to that.
I mean, I'm speechless, honestly. So many true. I mean, thank you so much for all of that, Immortal. Anyone who's joining us now, Immortal Technique is here with us. He's a very famous artist, a rap musician, living in the United States, and he thankfully accepted to join us in this live so that he can answer some of our questions. And also, I'll be more than happy now to take your questions. Please go ahead. I'm listening.
I wanted to ask you, I took these questions from my followers that wanted to know, and I got overwhelming questions about the Rafah Gate. So my followers have seen that aid that is being slowly trickling into Gaza comes through the Rafah Gate. And for those people who are watching the program who don't know what that is, well, Mansour, we have to educate them. The Rafah Gate is that little opening that exists between the border of Egypt and Gaza. And the countries of Egypt and Israel keep blaming each other about why aid is not getting through. Could you clarify for my public, Mr. Mansour, who is in control of the Rafah Gate right now?
Sure, definitely. Right now, what's happening is that there are thousands of aid trucks lined up behind Rafah Gate. And until now, so after 90 days, only 5,300 trucks were allowed in. Normally, we would get 500 trucks a day. So we're getting less than 10% of the actual need during non-war times. Remember, we have 1.8 million displaced. We have most of our infrastructure destroyed. There's an urgent need for a lot of medications, food, water, things to help us survive the winter, etc. All of that is behind the Rafah border right now. So the process now is that after a lot of difficulty, aid first crosses through the Sinai desert into the Egyptian border at the Rafah crossing. It doesn't reach the Palestinians immediately, no. First, it gets filtered through by the Egyptians. They decide, okay, which organization, which kind of aid should go through, depending on what they agree with the Israelis, with the US, with the UN. After that, every truck has to go to a gate called Karam Abu Salim Gate. It's a gate between the Israelis and the Egyptians. So that truck gets vetted and filtered. Sometimes it's taken back, it's not allowed to go through. Sometimes it's emptied, so you only have 2 or 3 pallets inside. And sometimes they keep it and then they let it go whenever they feel like it. And it doesn't still reach the Palestinian people. It goes to UN distribution warehouses. So from the Israeli-Egyptian border, it goes to a UN warehouse. And then they decide in the UN warehouse how they will send this aid to the Palestinians in need on the ground. So this is the process right now. And that's why there's a delay. That's why a lot of the food that arrives actually gets expired. That's why a lot of things that are sent are things that we don't need. Things like gloves or masks or linen cloths for the dead to cover them. Instead of getting fuel in order to ensure that we have enough running electricity and internet and our hospitals are running, we're getting like wood. It's as if we're living in the old ages. So this is the current situation and why there's a lot of frustration within the civilian population, within the NGOs, within the people who have donated their blood, their sweat, their hard-earned dollars, thinking that the aid will reach us as soon as possible. It is, but it's only trickling in. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, I appreciate that. The other follow-up I had, and then we'll go back and forth, is I saw pictures of people that are still living in northern Gaza. Can you confirm this? Because a lot of the news that we've been seeing from mainstream media and from Israel has been that northern Gaza has been cleared out and no one is living there. So can you tell me what you've seen personally and what is actually going on in northern Gaza for my public?
So since the beginning of the war, the Israeli media and their IDF through the IDF through different channels has said that the north is not safe. Go to the south. Leave northern Gaza. Northern Gaza is basically 3 refugee camps. You hear them in the news: Jabalia, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia. These are 3 north camps. And these camps have like maybe 500,000 people in all 3. And then to the south is Gaza City, the capital. It has around 1 million people. So we were told that leave the north, go south. South is safe, north is not safe. Until the beginning of the first ceasefire, 48% of the casualties were actually in the south. Remember, they were telling us the south is safe, but the south had almost as much casualties as the north. And because of history, because of what happened to our ancestors in 1948 and 1967, when they were forced by the Zionists at that time to leave their hometowns, their home cities, telling them that, look, we're just going to get rid of the terrorists in your cities. Leave your towns for a couple of weeks, and then come back. So they thought that by doing this propaganda to the people there, telling them leave, and once we cleanse the area, you will come back, that they will do that. But the people now learned from the history. And right now, as of now, there is at least 700,000 people in Jabalia, Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and Gaza City. They have not left. They remain steadfast on their land. They didn't listen to the Israeli propaganda. And despite everything that they went through the last 90 days, they are still remaining there. And honestly, these people are the real heroes, because without the people remaining there on the ground, the IDF would have taken that land to be their own, and they would have made another big Israeli settlement in the northern half of Gaza and taken that land to be their own. But with those people remaining there, Alhamdulillah, and these people are peaceful civilians, by the way, with these people remaining steadfast on their land, they were not able to accomplish this evacuation that they were expecting. These people, until last week, we couldn't get any aid into them. So you would hear about some starvation happening there. You would hear that the prices of goods soared. However, now there have been paths on both highways. There are two main highways in Gaza Strip. One in the east called Salah ad-Din, one in the west called Al-Rashid. So right now we are able to access, get aid through to the north. This wasn't the case a few days back. So things there are getting better. Today we were actually able to connect with those people who are organizing the aid up there in the north. Slowly but surely, with the support of the free people from outside the world, we will be able to help the people in the north, and slowly, slowly, we will be able to run the country the way it should be, like it was before. Back to you.
Okay. I guess you can ask me anything, but I wanted to keep going with the kind of questions that I had. Some of the other fans of mine say that they are from Saudi, they're from Jordan, some are from the UAE, some are from Egypt, and they say that they personally are ashamed of their governments, that they don't think their governments are doing enough, but they say that the people of these governments love Palestine and they support them, even though Morocco may have sought normalization, the UAE and Saudi sought normalization. The people of these countries very much resent what their leadership is doing and that they support the Palestinian people 100%. How do the people of Gaza feel towards the people versus the governments of those Arab countries? What is their feeling about that?
Since 1918, after World War I, unfortunately, yes, we think that the Arabs and Muslims in general gained their independence, but actually we are still being overruled indirectly by different superpowers of the world. Unfortunately, the politicians leading the Arab and Muslim countries, except for a few, do not own their own decisions. And they are being run through different means by, for example, the United States or the French or the United Kingdom or other countries. So this is the reality of the situation, that the people who are ruling over us in different Arab and Muslim countries do not reflect the reality of what Islam is, do not reflect the reality of what the people want for Palestine and for other countries that are seeking freedom around the world. So I think that it's going to be a process, right? I think that Gaza and Palestine in general, the fight here is not only for Gaza and Palestine. The fight is on behalf of the whole free world. We are at the tip of the spear. We are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And all of these people that are supporting us by different means, whether it's in the West, in the East, the Muslims, the Arabs, they think that, inshallah, once Gaza, once Palestine gets liberated, slowly it's going to trickle a domino effect so that they themselves can be liberated from their own governments that have been ruling them through corrupt, man-made political, social, and economic systems. I lived in Canada, I lived in the United States, I lived in different European countries. We think that we live in a democracy or in countries that respect human rights. But I think what happened here in Gaza forced us all to take the red pill and wake up that we are living in a matrix. And together with people like you who are spreading information and knowledge and educating the masses on the reality of the situation, the truth, what is really happening, I hope that slowly but surely we will be able to change the status quo in both the Arab and Muslim countries and in the superpowers like the United States, in order for them to listen to the will of the people, because the people are tired and they're not going to take this anymore.
Just a quick follow-up question to that. Last year, before any of this recent flare-up in the course of a 75-year occupation, Israel enjoyed alliances with the United States. It enjoyed a semi-stable relationship with Russia, even though the war in Ukraine was going on. And it maintained an economic relationship with China that was still guaranteeing loans from there. Presently, the United States is the only one of these three superpowers that still support Israel. Russia now has a very tumultuous relationship with Israel, and China has literally wiped Israel off of all of its digital maps. So my question and follow-up question is, how do the people of Gaza feel about Russia and China now? Do they think that they're supporting them, or do they see this just as a way of them being against America by helping Gaza here? Do they think that that will be permanent support, or do they see this as more political chess games being played by superpowers? What is their hope?
I think that's a very good question. The world right now, Philip, unfortunately is being ruled by materialism. Unfortunately, it's strong, eat weak, okay? And I believe, together with the Palestinians, that the world does not respect you except if you are strong, except if you are steadfast, except if they think that you are going to be the winner at the end of the day. And Russia and China and other countries who are using logic and seeing the actions of Israel and the actions of the Palestinians see that the end game is not on the side of the Israelis. They see it. And they are playing the long game. They want to win the hearts of the Arabs, the Muslims, the Palestinians, the people that are against the US policies, right? So they are playing it in a smart way. And Palestinians also need to play it smart. Because like I said, unfortunately, this is how the world works right now. And we need to be realists. We shouldn't break any of our values or morals while doing that. But at the same time, we need to make use of when these superpowers go neck to neck against each other. We need to leverage the power of those who are trying to support us. So I think that in general, the Palestinian leadership here really understands that and sees things for what they are. And I think that soon the United States will think, okay, you know what? This is not going the way we want. Look what happened in Afghanistan. After 20 years of supporting Karzai-like governments and spending billions of dollars trying to create a so-called Afghan army, losing thousands of its own soldiers, wasting taxpayer money, media, time, all of that. Look at what they did. They handed over the land back to those who they thought now are going to be strong. Regardless, we agreed with them or not, right? So I think the end game is very clear. And I think that the United States, sooner or later, they are going to be forced to make a decision whether they will abide to what is in best interest to their people, right? Or against the will of the people. However, they're going to pay a huge price, because civilizations don't collapse from external factors. Like you rightly said, like countries collapse from within. And Israel has already started to collapse from within. There are over 500,000 Israelis that left Israel. They're not coming back. Already, there's a lot of difference of opinion between members of the own right-wing war committees. Already, the leadership in Israel are not fighting for what is best for Israel. They are fighting for what's best for their own personal gains, right? Netanyahu doesn't want this war to stop. He wants the war to continue, because once it stops, it means that they're going to focus on him, they're going to take him to court, and he's going to go to prison. So while he continues trying to ensure that he personally survives, he's going to take down Israel with him. And if the US decides to continue to support him, they are going to go down with him, because they are going to lose the battle of the hearts and minds of the people. They are losing the media war. They are losing the ground battle. And honestly, I feel bad for the citizens of the United States, They are great people. They are freedom-loving people, and I have a lot of friends and relatives there, and I have a lot of mentors, professors, colleagues there, and I wish them the best, including yourself. I do not want to see the United States fall. I want to see the United States strong. However, they need to go back to what their founding fathers found them, the reason why. Why did they leave the United Kingdom? Unfortunately, they did what they did to the natives. This is unfortunate. But they had some values, they had some principles which they abided on. They didn't want the Federal Reserve to come into power, right? They warned of that. But right now, like you rightly said, unfortunately, since the United States is being controlled by other people, not by real loving Americans. Back to you. Sorry for being very long.
No, 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 no. The only thing I would say is that the people who founded this country were uh, probably worse than the Zionists. That's one thing I'll just warn you about. They were people who didn't see the humanity of other individuals. And I think one thing we always have to remember about the United States is the reason that racism still exists in this country is not for the reason that some people think it is. It's because of the cowardice of the United States. And for those people that are confused in the crowd that are watching the show, I'll explain perfectly. When the Crusaders invaded your holy land and took your city, or when the Mongols came and destroyed Baghdad, right? Or how about this? When the armies of the Prophet Muhammad came, and after his death, peace be upon him, they expanded to other areas. The purpose of them taking these lands was that they won the war, not because they were a superior human being. But America was so cowardly because Rome and the Caliphate and the rest of these great empires didn't have an excuse. They just said, hey, you lost the war, therefore you have to do what I said. So look at the father of Alexander the Great. When he defeated the Scythians, Philip II of Macedon requested 10,000 pounds of gold and 20,000 women of a breeding age, right? But when the United States conquered Black or African and indigenous people and enslaved them, the difference was there, brother, is that they made up these lies about how they were subhuman, that they were closely related to monkeys than people. And this is honestly, like whenever I talk, I hope that people in the audience disagree with me because they can go look it up on Google. This is how these people thought. They believed in their mind that these individuals were of a lower a race or a subhuman context. And therefore, when the institution of slavery disappeared, if that excuse hadn't been made, then all that would have happened is the institution of slavery ended. These people that used to be slaves because we conquered them are now free. But the difference was that this country invented something called eugenics. Eugenics is a program that says that white people are superior simply because of their European genes, that makes them a superior human being, and that a white person was actually more of a highly evolved human being. And therefore, when the so-called slaves were freed, because these people were actually people that were enslaved, they weren't slaves, they came, and what they did is say, hey, we have to somehow convince these people of their own slavery. Now, the other thing about the founding fathers that I'll tell you that's very interesting is that the majority of them were Masons. And for the people that don't know, that doesn't mean, oh, Illuminati, secret world. No, the people are students of history. And I'll give you one fact. One of the degrees of Masonry is to read the Quran. Why? Because all of the original documents of Greek and Roman philosophers and historians don't exist in Greek anymore. They're not existing on papyrus. They're not written down on wax. They're not written down on walls. They're written down, right, by Islamic scholars that translated them after the fall of the Byzantine Empire. And I think that, and previous to that, were inscribed after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is 476 AD. So when we talk about this, how could people, right? And this is the difference between the people that rule, like the people who are in charge of all the Arab countries, and the people that exist that are in charge of nothing, right? Like that exist and still support Palestine. But the ruling class thinks differently. So my question and my conundrum for people has always been, wait a minute, you're telling me that these people thought that black people were less than them, and yet they were such students of history that they must have studied the fact that Egypt was once ruled by all black pharaohs, right? That once upon a time, the Moors, who were actually a dark-skinned people who happened to be Muslim all over North Africa, came and were incredibly civilized individuals. So you didn't believe it yourself. You let the public believe those lies about subhuman people, but you yourself never believed it. And that is what I kind of think about the ruling class of society in how they function, right? They say, oh man, these people are so horrible. But at the same time, they're always countering what they're saying. Like the United States will say, Israel wants a regional war, but we don't want a regional war. When in reality, the United States dictates every single thing that Israel does. And I'll give your audience one example. We, as the United States, backed Saddam Hussein against Iran as a government, and we paid him, we talked about this before, we paid him billions of dollars and supplied him to destroy Iran. But the truth is, when they read Reagan's memoirs and they opened up these secret documents from the government, they realized that Ronald Reagan didn't want either side to win. He wanted them to destroy each other because he did not want a regional power to rise and replace their state of Israel. So as a consequence of Saddam Hussein being allied with the United States and NATO, it enabled him to do something that no other Arab leader was able to do at the time. He purchased a nuclear reactor from France because his idea was the same idea that Russia had. Why waste our money using our own oil? We should be on nuclear power and then be able to sell 100% of our natural resources. During this war that he was having with Iran, the United States couldn't attack Saddam Hussein. But since we didn't want him to elevate himself as a regional power, we gave the coordinates to Israel for them to use F-16 jets. Oh, by the way, there's no factory for F-16 jets in Israel, so we all know where they got them. To use those F-16 jets to bomb the nuclear reactor in Iraq. So it's a question of the same evidence that I'll show you or that you explained of your own people. The American people are a good, loving people. They're hardworking individuals. They want to see change. They want positive things. But the American structure and its existence since the foundation has always just been one sort of excuse for imperialism over another. And unfortunately, it proved your point from earlier that the governments of the world only respect strength, right? They don't respect anything else but that. So when Saddam Hussein said, hey, I don't have nuclear weapons, they said, okay, fine, we're going to rush in and take over your country. But when they said the same thing to that guy from North Korea, and they said, hey, man, you have nuclear weapons, and if you don't, then we'll invade your country. He said to them, yeah, I do have nuclear weapons. I mean, people can think Kim Jong-un is crazy, but regardless, he said to them, and he proved your point. He said, yeah, I have about 11 or 12 nuclear weapons. I'll blow up one of your countries. How about I'll blow up one of your cities? And he started naming cities in Hawaii and in California that he was going to blow up. And people said, okay, listen, we're going to leave him alone. Which is sad because that teaches every single person that you don't have to be a good person. You don't have to be a moral person. You don't have to be righteous. You don't even have to not be a murderer. You can be all of these things. But as long as you work for us, we'll tolerate you working for us, right? And I think that's the frame of mind that a lot of people have really fallen into. And I think that more than that, it leads me to kind of a bonus question, which is the people that are running away from the bombardments, right? Why is it that no one is talking about how the lack of any infrastructure or food and just making 300,000 people homeless is in itself a crime, right? Like I was having a conversation with a person who works in like city planning, and he said something to me that blew my mind, but it was something we came up with together. Even if Israel never bombed an innocent civilian person. Let's say that's true, which we both know it's not. But even if they never intentionally bombed a civilian person, they said that they intentionally and admitted to intentionally destroying 300,000 people's homes. And in a city or a city-state the size of Gaza, or a country the size of Gaza, if you make 300,000 people homeless in any big city, right? Whether it's New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Berlin, London, Sydney, those people are going to die regardless of that. And how much more or what else can people do, because they're frustrated right now? The number one thing that people are asking me in the comments and are writing to me on private message is, please ask Mansour, how can we donate? How can we best get donations or stuff to you guys? Because they have so many links, so many people saying, oh, you can get it from me, or how is the best way that they can get stuff to you guys? Is there a link they can follow that you can provide? Is there a specific organization that gets stuff through better than other people? Because what I'm getting from all over the world, from all of my fans, whether they're in Ireland or Mexico or somewhere in South Africa, they're saying, we want to help, but we don't know the best place to be able to donate. What is the best way to get resources to the people of Gaza?
Wow. Again, I'm dumbfounded. Everyone, again, this is Immortal Technique. He's a famous artist that is resident in the United States, and he thankfully accepted to join us here on this live to answer some of our questions, and also for the voices of the people here in Gaza to reach other people in the United States. Thank you again for joining us. This will be recorded, and inshallah, if with your permission, Philippi will send it over on Instagram and tag you on it. So there are many ways that you know, people around the world can support Gaza. I will end with the financial part and the monetary or the tangible part, but let's start with the things that you can do right now or continue doing right now. So number one, I think that social media really changed the game this time. When I first started to volunteer here in the media area in Nasser Hospital around 3 months ago, my main focus was on the TV channels. You know, I thought that when I appeared on Al Jazeera or Russia Today or CNN or BBC or CBC or Australian News or even Fox, I appeared on Fox News 6 times. I thought that by appearing on these channels that I will be able to reach the audience. But boy, I was wrong, because a month and a half back, a few people told me, Mansour, you're doing this wrong. I mean, yes, okay, remain appearing on TV, but it's social media platforms like TikTok, like Instagram, like all these are the platforms that the new generation and the people are now tuning into, not the mainstream TV anymore. And boy, they were right. Like one video on one of these channels can go viral and reach the right people more than all of the 8 different interviews that I did earlier. Again, my apologies for the buzzing noise. This is the buzzing noise for the Israeli drones. These are 24/7, and at night they increase the volume just as a way of mental, psychological warfare against the civilians here. My apologies. So social media, don't stop creating content, don't stop sharing, liking, commenting. Every little bit you do helps. Like I was talking to other people, little by little, small by small, pebble by pebble, a mountain gets created. Don't underestimate anything you do. You know, as Muslims, we believe that we need to do the right thing. Results will come. Results, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them happen. But you as an individual, you know what you are able to do, where you are right now, and you will be accountable for it. So please make sure you use the right things, the right tools available to you. And one of the simplest things is social media. So that's number one. Number two, demonstrate on the ground. Don't underestimate, going out there every day, every week, every couple of weeks, joining other fellow citizens in your country, in your cities, demonstrating for the truth, demonstrating to be on the right side of history here in Palestine. Trust me, it boosts the morale of the people of Gaza so much, seeing these demonstrations all across the world. Palestinians have family everywhere. They have relatives, they have friends everywhere. And when they tell them that, look, we are demonstrating, there are demonstrations for you guys by the thousands, by the millions in all of these cities, and we see them and we are here, this helps keep the people steadfast here even more, saying that, okay, we're on the right path. Hopefully, all of us together, we can even do better than this. So continue to demonstrate on the ground. Number three, boycott. This is a materialistic world. Economics and politics are linked together. And unfortunately, at the end, they are the ones that fund the different politicians on their different election platforms, especially in the United States. So when these big CEOs see that their paychecks, their bonuses will be cut, when these big organizations in the quarterlies announce losses and the stock market plunges, they will put pressure on the politicians to change their minds, especially in the United States, the UK, the Commonwealth countries. So you are more, I'm sure you guys know more than me about who are the different Zionist corporations that you need to boycott. I'm sure that you know who are the corporations who have sent support to the Zionist state even after October the 7th publicly and harassed their own employees about doing what they're doing. So please continue boycotting. That's number three. Number four, continue to lobby your politicians in different ways. In the United States, I think you have something called the 5 Calls app, and you have different people doing different things in different ways. Don't stop lobbying your politicians. They need to know that their position will be affected in the upcoming elections. And when they fear that, when they see that their party will be affected, when their position will be affected, hopefully this will help change their stance, whether it be in the United Nations or in the Security Council, or even in your local cities or your states, right? So don't stop lobbying your politicians. Number 5, donate but wisely. Okay, and let me elaborate more on that. There, unfortunately, is a lot of NGOs that have been unsuccessful in ensuring that aid reaches the Gaza Strip. There have, unfortunately, been a lot of organizations that have decided right now, because of the political situation, to freeze their funds in their own accounts instead of it reaching the Palestinian people on the ground right now. And my suggestion is the following: to donate wisely. Talk to Palestinians that you trust, whether it be your colleagues, your friends, people that you know have family members here in Gaza on the ground, and have a frank discussion with them about how to ensure that they can get help to reach the Palestinian people here right now, because the help is needed now, not in the future. Right now, we can get the Palestinian displaced civilian populations the help that we need with your support. So my suggestion is, please connect with Palestinians that you trust and get guidance from them on how to ensure that aid reaches us here right now. Don't click on any social media campaign on a social media platform and donate with your credit card. Put some effort into ensuring that your donations reach us here as soon as possible. Right now, as of now, we are not seeing a ceasefire that may happen right now. It's going to take some time. So if you think of donating goods, I cannot recommend right now a certain NGO, because I don't know which NGO will be given preference over others. I don't know. Right now, there's a lot of issues with bringing in goods. However, there are goods available right now to be bought. We have access to cattle farms, to vegetables, to fruits, to sanitary products through different means. So connect directly with Palestinians that you trust on the ground to ensure that your donations reach the people here. And this is my advice when it comes to donations. Do your homework and try to speak with people that you trust. Number 6, make the intention of inshallah joining us here in Gaza. You know, this war one day will stop. Borders will open. And we are looking towards all volunteers, anyone who would like to come and help, to come and join us here in Gaza. People think that when the borders open, millions will leave Gaza. I tell them no, the opposite will happen. Millions will come to Gaza to help the people of Gaza to rebuild their country. So make the intention of joining us here. Inshallah, if you make the intention and you put the right actions, inshallah, hopefully we will see you here soon. Hopefully we can treat you to high quality, good desserts. Hopefully you can enjoy the Mediterranean weather with us. And together, inshallah, we can rebuild Gaza. These are the main things I think that you can do right now. And if something pops up in the near future or there is some other tangible action, inshallah, I will let you know. I will let the others know as well.
I appreciate that very much. I don't know if you read this or if some of the people that don't know me yet knew this, but in 2009, I went on a fundraising campaign along with an organization called OMAID, and we built an orphanage and a school in Afghanistan. And I went there myself in 2009 to complete the construction of the orphanage myself. Eventually, there were 19 children that stayed at the orphanage, and we managed to make a small difference in the lives of those people. And I just want to be able to pledge my support to the people of Gaza in the same way and make this pledge to you here and to my audience that when the doors open, I pledge that I will come there and do the same thing that I did in Afghanistan.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, brother. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Unfortunately, Instagram has a 1 hour live, like a hard stop. So one of the things that I learned from you, and I think it's something that we can all learn, is the importance of education. The importance of, even if you don't agree with someone, fine, try to challenge him or her and read more about this story. So please continue to learn and educate yourself on 3 topics, because we want you to act based on facts, based on credible evidence, not based on emotions. The media might change its narrative, so learn about 3 things, 10 seconds. Number 1, Zionism. Learn about Zionism. Number 2, the Palestinian-Israeli historical conflict. And number 3, learn more about Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala